The boost formula probably needs no introduction. It's been a core part, for better or for worse, of Sonic's gameplay identity for nearly 2 decades ever since Sonic Unleashed in 2008, or if we count Sonic Rush, 2006. The boost gameplay focuses on high speeds, reactionary level design, and a large focus on spectacle and set pieces. And for what it's worth, this formula, despite my gripes with it, has still managed to deliver some really quality titles. Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, and Sonic Generations are all pretty great games, and they make great use of the titular boost mechanic. However, after Sonic Generations, something happened. Nothing. The next few years consisted of throwing the boost out of the window and giving us Sonic Lost World and the Boom games. Once those 5 years of ass were over, Sonic Team realized their mistake and made the switch back to the boost formula of gameplay with Sonic Forces and... what do you want me to say? Ever since then and now, we've been presented with 3, well technically 4 boost games if you count Dream Team, which I'd actually say does count. However, I haven't really played it nearly enough to give an opinion on it that's actually valid. But ignoring it, we've got Sonic Forces, Sonic Frontiers, and Shadow Generations. Now, while a lot of people do like those last 2 games, and I like Shadow Generations decently, I find that they all suffer from a huge problem, that being the fundamental misunderstanding of the boost formula and what made it work. Before we get into it, if you enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe as it helps me out a ton. If you want to go the extra mile, consider joining my Patreon for literally only $2, link in the description. Also, apparently there's this new hype feature on YouTube where you can essentially boost the amount of people the algorithm shows the video to, so do that. It's right around the title of the video, I think. I'm not too sure. But let's get back to it. I think to truly understand the faults of the last 3 games, we need to work our way up and start at where it all began. I meant the second place it all began. Sonic Unleashed introduced us to the boost in a 3D mainline title, and while a bit controversial at first, most people look back at it very fondly, especially the boost gameplay as a whole. So what's the boost all about? On the surface level, the boost gameplay is all about going at speeds Sonic has never gone before up until that point, emphasizing the speed factor and de-emphasizing things that had the potential to slow things down, like platforming. It was the idea of, if you're good enough, you won't slow down, taken to the extreme, giving players the ability, if skilled enough, to not lose any of their already ludicrous amounts of speed. Assisted with a more zoomed-in camera to make the speeds you were traveling at feel even faster, the gimmick of the boost in a single sentence would be going at breakneck speeds faster than Sonic's ever gone before. The boost itself is contained in a meter that can be constantly filled with either rings, badniks, or wisp capsules, depending on the game, and with the push of a button, Sonic takes off, lasting as long as you hold down the button or until the boost meter fully depletes. But I'm sure you already know this. The biggest question is, how does this affect level design? A surprisingly overlooked aspect of the series as a whole, but pretty much everything revolves around the level design. Level design is the execution of a gameplay formula. It can show off the strengths of the formula if done well, but it can also equally show off the flaws if done poorly. See that later on, take note. However, with this heightened speed, the level design philosophy was changed pretty drastically. Boost Formula Sonic is more so about reactionary gameplay and memorization via trial and error. Your primary obstacle in Sonic Unleashed isn't usually any enemies or things to actually hurt you, it's anything that can slow you down and stop you in your tracks. Granted, this was also important in the classics, but given that the boost essentially makes you more powerful as most enemies can just be ran through, and that speed in Unleashed is either 0 or 100, slowing down is the obstacle. Now, because of the lessened importance on platforming, the feeling of these games compared to most of the classics are drastically different. The classics being platformers with speed as a constant variable and being more methodical at points, and Unleashed being focused on a more traditional flow state where you're supposed to react to your environment more so than interact with it. The boost games have this certain rhythm to them, mostly found in Generations and Unleashed. There's always something going on. There's a more binary chain of events always happening. Homing attack, stomp, boost, slide, jump, quickstep, jump, slide, homing attack. It's very rhythmic in the way it feels to play. Now, because of the focus on reaction-based gameplay, the skill ceiling of these games are often defined by trial and error. Play a level, fail to react to something, keep a note of it in your mind, and react to it next time. Rinse and repeat. Now, Sonic games, and sort of every platformer, have trial and error in some way. It's especially prominent in those classic games due to a lot of the design philosophies present in them actually stemming from the arcades. But it's a bit different in boost games. In those classics, if you were skilled yet unfamiliar with the levels, you could perform pretty well in certain stages. However, in Unleashed, there is not that much you can do to get an above average run on your first playthrough, due to how reactionary it is. A lot of shortcuts or top paths you just simply won't be getting to, because unless you've got ridiculous reaction times, the only way you'll be taking them is by learning their placements via trial and error. So TLDR, Unleashed, and by extension most of the boost formula, is focused on extreme speeds and reactionary oriented level design. So let's take a look at the next game, why don't we? Sonic Colors is the next boost game, and it actually does quite a few things differently. Most of the fundamentals stay relatively the same. Sonic's physics are largely unchanged, and there's still a big focus on high speeds. However, Colors does something interesting that completely flips the formula on its head. It makes the boost an actual resource. Now, the boost, by definition, was a resource before, but was it really? If you ever went a moment without having a full boost meter, you were doing something wrong. But here, the boost is treated more as an actual resource, with the new way of obtaining boost, wisp capsules, being thrown out more sparingly, leading to a lesser time spent boosting. This change turns the focus of the game into more deliberate platforming as opposed to fast reactionary gameplay. Now granted, there are sections where things become more reactionary, but for the most part, the game is going for something more methodical and platforming oriented, and I think it works quite well. Removing the boost as a constant ends up giving you more variables to work with, as instead of your speed being either 0 or 100 constantly, you're forced to play with Sonic at varying speeds. This leads to some really fun workarounds and interactions with the level design. Boosting up a quarter pipe would send you really high, but now you're faced with quarter pipes in the absence of the boost sometimes. This leads to things that were rarely a factor on Unleashed, such as slope jumping, becoming something that greatly help you out in certain situations where you're left without the boost. So despite attempting something completely different with the formula, I think the execution is done pretty perfectly. Platforming as Boost Sonic can be a little awkward at points due to him not being perfectly suited for it. However, I think these slightly awkward controls are good, and you're still able to adapt to them and get to a point where they don't feel awkward. I think a lot of people give up on colors really quickly just because, well, it's a little awkward, when in reality, it's kind of an easy hill to overcome. Give it another shot, I think you can get used to it. But after this, we have Sonic Generation. This goes back to the initially established style of the boost found in Unleashed, and I gotta say, this is incredible. This is the peak of not only Boost Sonic, but 3D Sonic as a whole. While Unleashed was pretty great on its own right, there were still certain quirks about it that held the daytime levels back from perfection. In my opinion, there wasn't a ton that kept each level feeling fresh. I feel a lot of these levels can kind of blend together level design wise, and there's also a bit too many quick-step sections. Stages like Skyscraper Scamper are really great, but I never want to replay it because of the nearly full minute of mindless quick-stepping you're required to do. Generations trims the fat of Unleashed and does a great job at giving each stage more of its own identity. There isn't too much to say about Generations other than it perfected the style of boost found in Unleashed, but if they perfected it here, then that means things can only go downhill from here. And oh boy, did they. After Generations, they sort of abandoned the boost for a while, as I said way earlier, before bringing it back with Sonic Forces in 2017. This game is pretty much a mockery of the boost formula and everything good it did. Most of the fundamentals of boost formula still remain intact, but there's one thing that completely kills it. The level design. The level design in Forces is horrendous, I don't need to tell you that. Now, there's already arguments for the prior boost titles being hold forward to win simulators, but for the most part, high-level play of said games were quite the opposite. Sonic Forces is a straight-line simulator. They focused on nothing but spectacle, leading to a game where the levels are just boost to win with little happening. The reactionary-styled gameplay barely exists anymore because you're essentially given a 10-second heads up before you need to react to a shortcut or enemy or what have you, because nothing ever happens. It's completely and entirely brain dead. These stages individually have but a fraction of the interesting and unique level gimmicks found in any individual stage in prior boost titles. Not to mention certain things like the physics were made just generally worse, the homing attack carrying you to a full stop, and you're left with a boost title that exclusively exemplifies the issues that were found in prior titles. Now, not to necessarily defend the game, but I do want to give a little bit of leeway to the level designers. Under the impression I've been given, this game was made in like, I don't know, like a week. There were only 2 level designers on this thing. I'm sure that the level designers in this game are very competent. It's just, I feel that they likely had to work in a very strict time limit. But aside from that, 5 years later, we were given the next boost title, Sonic Frontiers. And I'll be honest, I think it somehow did the boost even worse than Forces. The boost before Frontiers could be labeled as a run button, and while that's a fair stance, you can't argue against the fact that boosting came with its own little risk and reward factor of having to go fast and missing a shortcut. There was the resource management of colors, not to mention the boost itself did carry little unique nuances and quirks that did give it, at the very least, some depth. However, Frontiers, this is just a run button. Resource management be damned, it is gone here. Killed. It automatically recharges after like 2 seconds, and if you don't run, you go at a snail's pace. Not that the boost in prior games weren't borderline required and needed nearly 24/7. However, the way it's handled is totally different. When you were boosting, I mean, you really felt that speed. In Frontiers, when you boost, well, you're almost left thinking, could I go a little faster? It feels slow. It doesn't deserve the title of boost, when this feels more like a jog Sonic would take as opposed to boosting through a place. Now, the closest and most earnest comparison is the cyberspace stages of the game, as they're just straight up traditional boost levels. No, they're like ripped off. They are the exact levels. I'm sure you know that by now. And God, what a perfect comparison piece for how horrible Frontier's boost is. Sections you used to zoom through in Unleashed now play more like a light jog. I know I've said that already. There's no urgency. There's barely anything to react to. I keep wishing I was able to go faster in these, and that's probably the most telling thing you could ever say about a boost game's quality, where the whole purpose is to go faster than Sonic's ever gone before. Oh yeah, also boosting no longer actually hurts enemies, so you can't just run through them anymore. Now, there is a second level to the boost when you reach max rings, and I will say this is much better, but it still has every single problem I've mentioned up to this point. The only thing that's changed is that, yeah, it does feel a little better, just simply because it's not as slow as it was before. Now finally, and most recently, we have Shadow Generations. Now, strictly from a game quality side, this game is leagues better than both Forces and Frontiers. However, that doesn't mean I don't have my issues with it, especially when it comes to the titular boost. So in terms of boost gameplay, while it certainly has qualities of the first three, it changes a lot of stuff that makes it generally worse. Now, there's some miscellaneous things first, like Shadow's natural jump not flowing well with just movement. Any environmental interactions that were ever possible in the first three just do not exist here, because anytime Shadow jumps on a slightly jagged rock, he just freaks the fuck out. I'm not even sure if slope jumping is in this game now that I'm thinking about it. I'll put text on screen once I start editing and have tested it out, but Christ, that's something. Overall, the physics of Shadow are just not up to par. Now, when it comes to the boost itself, I can't lie, this is pretty bad. Now, while not nearly as bad, it's suffering the same fate as Frontiers, where this boost just does not feel very fast at all. I wouldn't say I feel like I'm going at a snail's pace or anything, but Jesus, it is very noticeable. And it's not like the change in speed really has a purpose either. Colors had the excuse of being focused more on platforming, and it lets you experiment with Sonic's natural physics when the boost was absent, but here, there's no physics to experiment with, only spear gliding. The level design does not accommodate this changed speed very well, like it doesn't do anything past games couldn't or anything. It just has the byproduct of making the reactionary style of gameplay less interesting because it's way easier to react to something without much trouble. Again, it shows how much we've lost the plot when the formula that was built on the foundation of being incredibly fast has its recent entry be almost slow to the point where people want it to be faster. The level gimmicks are almost non-existent as well, with any gimmicks coming from the Doom powers in their very binary rinse and repeat single use case scenarios. So while I see a lot of people give love to Shadow Generations, and while I do personally like the game, seeing it even brought up in the same conversation as original Generations quality-wise, I'm sorry, but nah, I just can't get behind that. Shadow Generations does everything worse than its predecessors, and I'm tired of pretending like it doesn't. Well, that's where we are at the current day. Really, I think the boost has overstayed its welcome for far too long. Sonic Unleashed, Colors, and Generations were great, and I could get behind the idea of one last game being a Generation sequel with original levels, but that didn't happen, and we were left with 3 mediocre games, all ranging in quality, none surpassing a 7 out of 10 in my honest opinion. It's like a joke at this point for some reason, but despite all the quality early boost titles have put out, we need momentum. We need slope physics at the helm of Sonic gameplay again, and I really hope Frontiers 2 does that. The boost was a good formula, but it needs to go, and I don't really want to see it ever again. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you made it this far and enjoyed, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and if you want to go the extra mile, join my Patreon. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.